Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspectives on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show, the revolt against Wall Street continues. And this week, it was silver that grabbed the attention of small-time traders. I'll be asking Jamil Ahmed, Director of Investment Strategy at NAGA, if we have witnessed the birth of a new stock market trend. And 52,000 people are said to have been killed in northern Ethiopia since the conflict in the Tigray region began just a few months ago. I'll be speaking with the regional spokesperson for the International Committee of the Red Cross in Africa, Aliona Shinenko, about this fast-evolving humanitarian disaster. Then later, this week, communities across the globe came together to mark World Cancer Day. Dr. Zainab Shinkafi Bagudu, the First Lady of Kebbi State, Nigeria, and the founder of the Medicaid Cancer Foundation, will be letting me know how diagnosis and treatment has improved in the country due to investment and more public awareness. But first, let's start the programme with news from here in the UK. Earlier this week, British scientists discovered another COVID-19 mutation that appears to make the virus more resistant to vaccines. The new variant is present in the strains that arose in South Africa and Brazil and is thought to help the virus resist vaccines and antibody therapies, as well as infect people who already fought off COVID. British Health Secretary Matt Hancock told MPs in Parliament that it's still too early to know the impact of this new discovery.
We're doing a huge amount of work with the scientists and the pharmaceutical industry to develop modified vaccines should they be necessary, and we're also monitoring the results of work to understand the efficacy of the existing vaccines against the variants of concern. We do not have a point estimate for the difference in the efficacy of the vaccine. The efficacy needs to be measured both in terms of your likelihood of catching the disease and in terms of your likelihood of being hospitalized or dying from the disease. There is a significant amount of work underway to understand all of those things, both in labs and in the field.
Here's some other news from across the globe. Medical professionals across Myanmar are taking part in a countrywide act of civil disobedience and have pledged to stop working in protest of Monday's military coup that ousted elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi. A statement from the group said the army had put its own interests above a vulnerable population facing hardships due to the coronavirus pandemic. The army seized power earlier this week, cutting short an unsteady transition to democracy on the grounds of fraud in November's general election, which Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy party won in a landslide. Shares in GameStop plunged as much as 65% earlier this week as the trading mania sparked by small investors lost momentum. Other heavily shorted stocks, also targeted by amateur investors on influential forums such as Wall Street Bets on Reddit, are also in freefall. But the episode has left many asking if this is the beginning of anti-establishment stock market rebellion. For more on this, I'm now being joined by Jamil Ahmed, Director of Investment Strategy at NAGA. Jamil Ahmed, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I was going to actually start by saying, can you explain to us what's happened? But if nobody knows by now, they'll never know. But last week, it was GameStop. This week, it's silver. Have we seen a new trend? 2020 was a very strange year. Could this be a strange year for the stock market?
Continuation of strangeness, it's quite possible. In terms of what's happened, I can liken it to, you think of Wild Wild West. You've got on one side of the on one side, you've got these very elite institutions, very, very wealthy individuals. And on the other side, you've got everyday folk who want to fight back. They don't feel like the wealth is being spread evenly. They don't feel like, free society and all of this sort of stuff. In the movies, that is anyway. But in terms of the financial investment industry now, you've got these individual traders who do not feel like they've been benefiting from the opportunity that some very elite people have during this pandemic. For example, your technology giants, who've made such huge and even astronomical profits that are very difficult to articulate when the everyday economy has gone through the worst depression that we've all seen in our lifetime. And this is what it's come to. It's come to a bit of a head. It's unexpected, but the retail traders are saying, hey, why are we unable to benefit or at least have a level playing field against what the others have, and they have a point. So this is essentially what happened. They had word from a very elite hedge fund that apparently they put a short position, and short means silent position, on a particular stock, which was GameStop. No, most people hadn't really heard of it before, unless you've been in the States and you've seen those retail stores. Anyway, so this community ganged up and said, okay, we're going to go the other direction. They happened to win that battle, but we have to take into account as everyday audience, and we have to be aware of risks. Never invest in this kind of situation anything more than it's possible to lose, because trading and investments are two different things. Trading is short term. That was a trade. Investments are long term. You're doing it for a long term thing. You have your capital, you're willing to sit on your position. And now they won that battle, but as we see, that stock has now fallen dreadfully since then. I think it's down something like 60% just overnight. The war's a bit different. And we're talking about institutions and very elite individuals, and the volumes of the capacity that they can put into asset classes. It's David and Goliath. And although I agree the retail audience should have to have a voice, they should be able to participate in open markets like the rest of us can. And it's very good that the White House are picking up on this. Nancy Pelosi, Elizabeth Warren, Janet Yellen, who's the former Fed chair and the Treasury Secretary now of Biden's administration. And they're saying that, you know what, what's happened in the market over the past week isn't quite correct. So it will be looked into. But our audience have to be aware that this is a very complex situation, and it might unravel further. We saw silver this week. We had to see what's next. But just be aware of your risks.
Do you know what? Thank you, Jamil. You raised some really valid points there, apart from the fact that that was a great economic history lesson. Thank you. What's different now, very briefly, Jamil? Because, of course, as you said, you know, the David versus Goliath story, it's as old as the Bible, isn't it? We know that, for example, last quarter, Amazon, £100 billion worth of sales. As you said, you know, you can't even put these figures and articulate them. But what's different now? And is it likely that these social media traders, it could become a thing? It could actually take off?
It can become a thing. I think that what we saw in most recent history has been populism. I'm definitely not saying that these people are right-wing or a populist agenda, but we're seeing communities and everyday voices, and every voice counts, and that voice was able to move that particular asset class. So it's definitely something that is a growing environment, huge communities. These platforms have extremely strong level of followers. You don't quite know who's following them. So there might be some very influential people also under those profiles. That's something we don't quite yet know. So yes, certainly it can become a trend. And it's something that is a benefit to free markets. We all believe, like we believe in open societies and freedom, we also believe in freedom in markets. And everyday people who want to participate in investments should have as much right, if not more, than those who are already very wealthy and have benefited from that system for many, many years. Again, we have the worst economic backdrop. That's all the negativity. But essentially, there is a small minority who have benefited from what's happened globally after the year. And the majority, which can be likened to these retail traders, want their slice of the cake.
They want a slice of the pie, don't they? Let's just see what happens. We're going to have to talk to you again, Jamil, to keep us updated. Who knows? Silver today, gold tomorrow. Jamil Ahmed, Director of Investment Strategy at NAGA. Thanks for joining me on the show. To other news now, and Europe has been witnessing widespread protests against restrictions imposed to stem the spread of coronavirus. Over 2,000 demonstrators were fined for violating restrictions in the Austrian capital Vienna, and in the Netherlands, people took to the streets in different cities despite the nationwide curfew. Concerns are mounting for the millions of people who have been internally displaced in northern Ethiopia as clashes continue between the government and the Tigray's People's Liberation Front. There are reports that up to 52,000 people may have died since the crisis began in November. For more on this, I'm now being joined by Aliona Shinyenko, the regional spokesperson for the International Committee of the Red Cross in Africa. Aliona Shinyenko, thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. I did read a report in the BBC suggesting that up to 55,000 people could have died in the region. There are so many conflicting reports. I know the ICRC have scaled up its efforts in that region. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening on the ground?
So yes, we are scaling up our response. We have been present there since the beginning of the fighting and responding to the situation that is very worrying indeed. Unfortunately, in many areas of Tigray today, especially the rural areas outside the main cities, the access today remains extremely challenging. And this is why for us it is extremely difficult to confirm any figures coming out today about the humanitarian situation, just because we don't have the full picture, because there are many people that are still out of our radar, because they are outside the main cities in the areas that we cannot reach.
Absolutely, it's awful, isn't it? I know another word or another term that's been flying around is the word famine. I know it's almost seen as an F word when it comes to aid agencies because nobody wants to use it, and especially when it comes to Ethiopia because of the past. But do you think it's fair that some media outlets are saying, you know, there is a humanitarian crisis that is resembling a famine in that part of the country?
I think we need to be very clear that there is a humanitarian crisis, a very serious humanitarian crisis, and that the humanitarian needs are overwhelming and they continue to increase as fighting continues. And these people, they lack everything. They lack food, they lack water, medical care, and they do need humanitarian assistance. And they need it urgently. Talking about famine, famine is a very technical term. And like you need a large scale and very precise and systematic assessment to be able to declare famine, because a certain set of criteria needs to be met. And as I said, right now we are still facing enormous challenging accessing big parts of Tigray, especially the rural areas that are outside the major towns. And this, the humanitarian situation specifically in this area is the most concerning. And we just don't have the means to carry out right now the assessment necessary to be able to confirm or to say that there is famine. But the needs that we are seeing, the food needs, the water needs, the healthcare needs, they are very, very high. And it is extremely important that the humanitarian access improves so that people can receive the assistance.
It may seem like an obvious question, but then when you're talking about COVID-19 in Africa, it's so nuanced, isn't it? Because, of course, the global north and where I am here in London has been so devastatedly affected, not so much in some parts of Africa. But I can only presume COVID-19 is causing this situation and making it even more difficult for you.
COVID-19 is definitely is another factor further complicating a situation that is already extremely complex, because we are talking like there's a lot of people who are displaced right now, and these people, they live in very difficult conditions, very often in very crowded conditions, and with very limited access to hygiene and to water, to healthcare. And so it's obvious that in this type of situation, in this type of condition, people are they are much more vulnerable to contagious diseases like COVID. And also for us as humanitarians, it is also much more difficult to operate in such environment.
Absolutely. Well, we wish you and your team all the best. Aliona Shinenko, you're the regional spokesperson for Africa for the International Committee of the Red Cross. Thank you so much for joining me on the show. On February the 4th, the world stood still to mark World Cancer Day. And despite the global fight against the cruel disease, cancer still receives low priority for healthcare services across sub-Saharan Africa. One lady who has been working tirelessly to change this is my next guest, Dr. Zainab Shinkafi Bagudu, the First Lady of Kebbi State, Nigeria, and the founder of the Medicaid Cancer Foundation, a vehicle created to support cancer patients, promote cancer awareness, and drive community cancer campaigns for underserved communities across Nigeria. this week, lots of communities across the world are stopping, pausing and celebrating the day. And now for somebody like you, I know it's not just one day or 1 week, you are constantly advocating, constantly promoting. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the activities that Medicaid Cancer Foundation have been up to or will be embarking on over the next couple of weeks?
Hi, Juliana. It's a pleasure to be here finally as well. I sit on the board of the UICC as a director. And one of the things that my foundation, the Medicaid Cancer Foundation, does is to advocate for equal opportunities in cancer treatment, cancer diagnosis, cancer screening. I kind of took it from the back to the beginning. So it's screening, diagnosis, and treatment, as well as awareness, of course. We will be visiting our cancer patients. We've started this week. I went out yesterday visiting patients that have been diagnosed with cancer who are at various stages of their treatment and are unable to fund their treatments properly. We raise funds from corporate organizations, government agencies, high net worth individuals to assist these kind of patients so that they can complete their treatment or even start in some cases. The economic implication of cancer is one of the biggest issues that we face in low middle income countries. So we tend to focus a lot on that aside from the awareness, because sometimes, patients don't want to go to the alternative healers, but they just cannot afford proper medical care that is advised, the chemotherapy, the radiotherapy. And of course, the access, the availability of the health infrastructure is one of the issues that is that burdens patients here. So we try to help them with navigation, getting to the right hospital, especially in Kebbi State, where my husband is the governor. We've been able to put in place some more facilities than there were when he took over. It's a lot of work, and we'll also be training healthcare workers. The training starts on Thursday, that's tomorrow as well. And we'll be training them on how to screen and diagnose early cervical cancer. In November last year, the WHO launched a global strategy of which Nigeria is a partner to that strategy for the elimination of cervical cancer by the year 2030.
Let me bring it back to modern day and where we are at the moment, because of course everybody is still talking about COVID-19. We thought that we could perhaps leave it in 2020. That's clearly not the case. There has been obviously a scramble for new vaccinations. There's been so much innovation, billions, funneled in to try and find the miracle cure. Are you hopeful that this could perhaps leak into other treatments, like into treatments for cancer? Or are you concerned that, everybody's only solely focused on COVID?
Well, thank you, Juliana. It's a little bit of both, actually, to your question. The COVID-19 outbreak indeed is a huge pandemic that it's an unprecedented one that has affected the entire world, the entire health systems. It's questioned what we're doing with our health infrastructure in all countries, not just the low income ones, but the high income ones as well. And for us here in Nigeria, it hasn't been easy, particularly for the cancer patients. As you know, cancer is the profound underlying illness that COVID-19, they are particularly more vulnerable to COVID-19. So the intervention and the investment that has been put into COVID will eventually benefit cancer patients in the long term. But in the short term, what it has done is it's halted a lot of awareness programs, research programs, screening programs, as well as access to treatments, not to mention things like distance in our own parts of the world, where patients have to travel long distances to access their radiotherapy care. I know that this is the same everywhere.
I want to have an honest discussion with you about health and the lack of funding and infrastructure that's been put into facilities in Nigeria. Rather than, doing a bish, bash, bosh, because I know sometimes in the diaspora we can be pretty harsh when we're talking about development in Nigeria. But what lessons have been learnt? Because of the pandemic, because the whole world has had to look at their health system. We've had to do that here in the UK with the NHS.
I think basically people tend to appreciate more the importance of awareness and education now. And the fact that doctors and the agencies like the primary healthcare agency should not just be limited to building big hospitals, but without building the human capacity that is required to run these hospitals. When the outbreak came, yes, there were a lot of resources and facilities and equipment was thrown at Africa and Nigeria and all the states. But you will find that a lot of them have not been used adequately as they should be. It's just now with the second outbreak that the second wave that people are going back and trying to see what's in all those boxes that came, the ventilators, all the machines that were donated. Majority of them are still lying in boxes. By the time the second wave came, the isolation centers were shut down. And the reason for that is there's no adequate human resources to keep on manning those centers or to have more permanent ones. But there was movement. I can't say exactly how much movement, but in Kebbi, for instance, we now have a better isolation center that is more permanent and it is equipped, but we still have the need for a more world-class infectious disease hospital. So it really brought to fore the issues that exist in the health sector and the need to do more for equipping, for the infrastructure, and most of all for developing human capacity.
Here in the global north, anti-vaxxers, protests, it's a massive issue. There's so much skepticism, so much fear about these vaccines. I'm sure you've seen some of the content that's flying around on WhatsApp and Facebook. Why is there such resistance to what some people are just describing as, you know, a scientific breakthrough? Where is this fear coming from? And is it also, palpable in Nigeria?
I will answer the question in my context in Nigeria. This is something that we face with Panadol, paracetamol, and not just COVAX or HPV vaccine. And it is something that we have been facing for a very long time. It has to do with the education, the poor level of education of our people, and the high level of belief in alternative systems such as traditional medicine and all the alternative systems and spiritual healing. Yes, we're all spiritual or to various degrees, and we believe in God and we all pray, most of us rather, but the education is what makes the difference. You know that you do not just sit on your faith without having and doing any work. You must be able to treat yourself for the illness whilst you're praying. So that is the problem. People have not been adequately educated. And that's what I said in the beginning or in the last question about the need to develop awareness to a level where people can understand what is going on. We've been facing this with the HPV vaccine for lots of years, and now it's being seen with the COVAX. So people need to be educated, to be shown that this is what is going to happen, to bring in the traditional rulers and all our religious bodies so that they can explain to the local people, even to the middle class people. We see middle class, well-educated women with breast cancer that would rather go through Chinese therapy. I'm not saying it's bad, but it has not faced the amounts of clinical trials and research that conventional medicine has been through. So it's about education. It's about letting people know exactly what you're doing and not hiding anything.
Dr. Zainab Shinkafi Bagudu, the First Lady of Kebbi State, Nigeria, the founder of Medicaid Cancer Foundation. Thank you so much for joining me on Channel's Business Global. I'm really looking forward to picking up this conversation with you again later in the year. Thank you so much, Dr. Zainab.
Have a nice day and you stay safe.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today, but do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.